All right, we're back with part 3 here in this series where I'm sharing the lessons that my team and I learned from managing $700,000 a month in ad spend for a B2C regenerative medicine company. And if you're new to the YouTube channel, welcome. My name is Sebastian Robeck. I have been around the block in the online space over the last 7 years. I've worked as the previous CMO for Cole Gordon and Closers.io after selling my own high-ticket 7-figure-a-year coaching business. I've also worked as the director of marketing for several high-ticket info brands doing between 7 to 8 figures a year. And current day, my team and I here at 7FM help high-ticket info businesses scale from being stuck at a couple $100,000 a month to scaling to high 6 figures and even 7 figures a month, and do it without losing their minds in the process. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And today I'm going to be sharing specifically the tech tracking and attribution setup that we used inside of this B2C regenerative medicine company to scale to multiple 8 figures a year. You're going to get a direct line of insight into what tech tracking and attribution looks like at extremely high spend and scale levels. And my goal for this video is for you to walk away with insights that you can apply to your own high ticket info business so you can get better data, cleaner data, and as a result, make better decisions. So let's dive right in. In this video, I'm going to be covering 4 things. Number 1, what our ad tracking setup look like, our funnel and our call tracking, our sales tracking, and then lastly, I'm going to be sharing some core challenges that we faced, things we did well, things we didn't do so well because we did make some mistakes, and then lastly, I'm going to share the lessons that we learned in making those mistakes. So first off, we have ad tracking. So as I mentioned in the previous 2 videos, 95% of the ads that we were running for this particular business were on Facebook. We had a little bit of Google search and a little bit of YouTube traffic, but those were not our primary traffic sources. It was all Facebook for the most part. So the first 2 pillars of our ad tracking were our daily tracking sheet where we tracked all our key metrics. We had a VA fill in that sheet every single morning with all the key metrics that we were tracking. I've talked about this in a previous video. This is absolutely vital in order for you to have a finger on the pulse day to day of how your marketing and sales are performing. Next up, we had weekly ads audits. So this is where I would personally meet with our internal media buying team. Once a week, we would do a full top-down analysis and a deep dive on all of the campaigns inside of each ad account for each offer. So again, we had 3 separate offers, which was essentially like running 3 different businesses inside of one company. So there was quite a lot to it, as you could probably imagine, as you can see here in these videos. So these weekly ads audits were extremely important in allowing us to consistently course correct and make really sharp decisions based off of trend analysis and actual data, not just guessing what was working and what wasn't. So a really important piece of our ad tracking setup was we didn't just rely on browser tracking in the native Facebook pixel tracking setup. What I mean by this is the normal Facebook pixel setup is you have your pixel, you install it into your funnel, or you use Google Tag Manager, and then you install your normal standard events. That's great. Problem with that, as you're already probably aware, is that native ad tracking on Facebook is extremely inaccurate with iOS updates and all the things happening on that front. Data is extremely inaccurate. Therefore, it's really hard to make clean decisions based off that data. So to hedge against that, what we did is we set up server-side tracking alongside of our browser tracking, which browser, again, is just the native Facebook ad tracking. But we also set up server-side tracking using a tool called Stape.io. If you're not familiar with server-side tracking and what that is, you can look that up on YouTube. You can find that elsewhere. Just know it's a much more accurate degree of tracking on your ads that bypasses a lot of the obstacles that Facebook's native tracking runs into and creates the inaccuracies in the data. So you absolutely need to have server-side tracking installed if you want truly clean data on your ads, and that was incredibly helpful for us. So we had a combination of Google Tag Manager containers along with Stape containers, and those really allowed us to have bulletproof ad tracking. Of course, as a lot of you guys are probably using that are watching this video, we used Hyros for attribution. My personal preference is 100% Hyros. I've used Segmetrics before. I've used a couple of different attribution softwares, and for me personally, I love Hyros the most. It's just the easiest to use. It's the cleanest. It's just great, honestly. So Hyros was our attribution sort of source of truth, if you will. And here are the events we tracked for our Facebook ads. So first, we tracked our Facebook standard events inside the native pixel setup. Those 2 main events were applications submitted. So again, nothing crazy fancy here. A lot of this stuff was very simple because simplicity is what's going to scale when it comes to tracking in tech. So we fired app submitted. Now there's a very important thing to note here, both on the application firing and the call event firing. So in order to keep our pixel clean, which is incredibly important at scale, and what I mean by keeping your pixel clean is ensuring that you're feeding the right kinds of data and right kinds of people who are taking actions with you and your business back to the pixel so that Facebook can better optimize and find even higher quality people as you continue to spend more. And the way we did that is we made sure that we only fired the application submitted event on qualified applications. So for example, our funnel for all three of our offers was add to a VSL page, and on that page we'd have the VSL and an application embedded right underneath it. That application, we used Typeform to do that, and depending on somebody's answers to the application, it was usually a mix of financial qualification and other intent-driven questions and their answers to them. We would have logic that would redirect somebody depending on what their answers were. So if somebody answered the questions in a way where, based off the logic we use, we deem them to be qualified, we would redirect them to the booking page where they can then book a call. And on that booking page, that would then fire off an application submitted event. Now, if they were unqualified, based off the logic, we would send them and route them to a totally separate thank you page that did not have any pixels or any events on it at all. And that allowed us to ensure that we would not send shitty quality traffic back to the pixel. And we did the exact same thing for the call scheduled event. This was just incredibly crucial because, again, if you're spending anything, it really doesn't matter what you're spending, but especially if you're spending larger budgets, multiple thousands of dollars per day. You know, for us, we were spending close to 25 grand a day across 3 different offers. Your pixel purity, if you will, the cleanliness of your pixel data can literally like make or break the business, honestly. I know that sounds a bit over the top, but it's true. So this was incredibly important for allowing us to keep that pixel clean. What we also did is we also had a separate Hyros pixel that we set up inside of Hyros for offline conversions. And it was a totally separate pixel from our normal Facebook pixel. And we used this as a sort of separate black box data container that we would also use to test different campaigns. Because sometimes you're just going to get different data with different pixels, even with the server side tracking. So it was definitely a worthwhile sort of separate set of data for us to test with. Now, what I really liked about our Hyros pixel was that we were able to fire back certain events to that Hyros pixel based off of tags in Hyros that we would set up and based off different audiences that were all tied back to certain rules. So for example, one thing that worked incredibly well for us was I set up an automation where we would fire off a live call tag if the sales team closers move somebody from one pipeline stage to another inside of Go High Level, which is the CRM software we were using. And that live call tag would get fed back to that original lead inside of Hyros. And then our automation made it so that our call scheduled event inside of Hyros would only fire on live calls. And this is a little bit counterintuitive, but incredibly powerful because it meant that we took our tracking and our pixel purity to a whole other level where we're not just optimizing around qualified calls, we're actually now optimizing around live calls, which is just a layer deeper than what most people even think to do. And that really allowed us to continue to scale with profitability on the ad side. And again, as I said before, regular monitoring of pixel purity was absolutely incredibly vital. I cannot emphasize that enough. So you've got to really ensure that the only applications and calls that fire the pixel are qualified based off of your logic. And that also includes set calls from your outbound setting team. So let's continue funnel and call tracking. Let's dive right in. So here's the tech stack that we used for our funnels and our call tracking. So we had ClickFunnels, where we hosted all of our funnel pages. Typeform for our applications, Go High Level for sales, pipeline management, CRM, and calendars, and everything else that Go High Level does. We also used it for email marketing. Slack we use for the obvious, for communication, but we also use Slack for tracking applications and calls, and I'll explain how we did that in just a second. And by the way, Slack didn't necessarily act as our only data source or tracking source. It was just an additional data source that allowed us to cross-reference and cross-check the cleanliness of our data when we were QCing it every morning. So as far as funnels go, again, we had 3 main funnels, 1 per offer, and each funnel had their unique set of pages per traffic source. So for example, let's say we have offer 1, and offer 1 was running on Facebook, and it was also running on YouTube, let's say, for example, which we did have a little bit of YouTube traffic going. So that offer would have unique funnel pages just for the Facebook funnel, and then same thing for the YouTube funnel. Again, I know that might sound a little bit redundant or complex, but trust me, at this scale, and this is, again, everyone has their own style of data and tracking and tech setup. And to me, there's really no right or wrong way. There's just what works for you and what allows you to sleep well at night and not lose your mind. And for us, this just worked really, really well. So what we then also had was we had separate app and booking pages for the additional sources like email marketing, organic, our home website, and each of these application and booking pages for each of these sources also had their own unique Typeform and Go High Level calendar embed so that we can very easily go into Typeform, Go High Level, and pull the hard data at any moment of how many applications or calls were coming from those individual sources. Next up, all applications and all call bookings got tagged accordingly in Go High Level and Hyros, depending on their source. So for example, if somebody filled out an application for one of our offers from the email marketing page that was designated for that funnel, they would then get tagged inside of High Level and Hyros as, say, application dash offer name dash email, right? Next up, we had a master tracking sheet for all applications and all calls for each individual offer. Again, as you're going to notice here at this scale level, it's incredibly vital that you have multiple data sources so that you're not over-reliant on one single source of truth. Because in theory, having one source of truth is amazing. In practicality, it doesn't always work out so well. So you want to have multiple sources of data so that you can not necessarily always have the exact pinpointed numbers, but more so have enough clarity on the numbers to get close enough to really just building a narrative of what's happening. So I hope that makes sense. So again, that's why we have a master tracker for all apps and all calls, so we can always reference back at any moment to that along with our other data sources. Next up, we also had dedicated Slack channels for each offer. And within that, each offer had a Slack channel for the applications per source that came through for that offer. So things like organic, email, etc., inbound ads bookings per source, and setter call bookings as well. So again, we had these Slack channels so that if at any moment we're like, hey, how many set calls did we get yesterday for offer number 1? We can just go into the set call channel and look and literally just go track it very, very quickly. Next up, we also had a separate tracking sheet just for email marketing. This is incredibly important because at scale, really in this, I'm going to talk more about this in other videos, but email marketing is by far one of the most profitable channels, especially if you're in a high ticket sort of info coaching, education based business. And if you don't treat email marketing like it's its own business, then it's always just going to be a mediocre, subpar performing traffic source for you. We didn't do that. We treated it like it was its own business, and it had its own tracking sheet. So we tracked all the emails in there that we would send, all of our broadcasts, the performance of our autoresponder emails, open rates, click rates, booked call numbers based off Hyros UTM parameters we would use for each individual unique email, top performing broadcasts, top performing autoresponders, the work. So tracking email as its own thing was incredibly important alongside everything else we're doing. Next up, this was one of the most important processes for us, which was daily QCing of our data. So what I mean by this is we had a team of VAs on the marketing team that were solely responsible for tracking our data every single day, but also cleaning that data. So again, not just tracking the data, but cleaning it. And what I mean by that is they would cross-check, okay, how many set calls are we seeing in this data source? Okay, let's cross-check that in Slack. Let's manually tag these set calls in Hyros for the ones that didn't automatically get tagged, because the truth is, at this scale level, even if you set up the best automations and the best workflows, the truth is shit breaks at this scale and there's no way around it. The way around it, if you will, is having processes to fill those holes when they happen, because they inevitably will. And then lastly, they would do things like checking if set calls were from pre-existing ads bookings or if they were pure outbound sets. So again, we had our team of VAs collect and track the data, and then they would clean it and QC it to ensure that there were as few to no holes, if possible, in the data that we were reporting in our tracking sheets. Because those tracking sheets, like our daily, weekly, and monthly sheets, were the ones that I, along with the sales directors and everyone in the executive team, would use to ultimately make decisions on the trajectory for the business. So it's incredibly important to have that data clean. Next up, let's talk sales tracking. So each sales team, again, each offer had its own team of setters and its own team of closers. And each of those teams had their own central hub trackers for both closers and setters, where they tracked all their key metrics. We also had all the key metrics tracked by individual rep for each sales team, which was incredibly helpful for both the sales directors and us on the marketing to be able to see. And then lastly, we would have all of those sales metrics pulled into a separate central hub dashboard where we housed all of our marketing and sales metrics for that particular offer. And then lastly, we were doing constant reviews of things like team performance on the sales side. It was less about us directly evaluating the team because we weren't obviously managing the sales team, but it was more of just getting a general temp check from the sales directors on how the reps are doing, how things are going, and anything that we need to be aware of. What was more important for us on the marketing side that we needed to focus on and keep a constant finger on the pulse of was things like calendar availability, because again, that heavily dictates how much we're spending, projected capacity for the sales team. So if they know that in 2 weeks a closer is leaving or a new closer is coming on board, we needed to know things like that. And then lastly, how the sales team was pacing relative to whatever their unit goal was. Were they on pace, off pace, why? Just keeping us in the loop on that so we can course correct as needed on the marketing. So let's keep going here. Let's talk about some of the challenges and lessons. I'm going to run through these quickly. Challenge number one is at this scale, as you can imagine, attribution gets very complex. The problem is that there's multiple touch points before somebody actually becomes a client, and that just makes attribution messy. So the solution was not trying to get picture perfect attribution and know exactly where every single client, quote unquote, came from, because you can't really gauge that. So instead, we would focus on MER, which is marketing efficiency ratio, which is just the overall profitability at a macro level of our marketing. How much are we spending? How much revenue is coming back into the business? And the ultimate lesson there is that no single attribution model is going to tell the whole story at scale. Challenge number two is data lag and discrepancies. Again, at scale, it's natural you're going to have these sort of slight discrepancies between different data sources, time zone differences. It's just normal to have those lags. So the solution was we built internal reconciliation processes that allowed us to have acceptable variance thresholds, meaning, okay, we're willing to tolerate this amount of variance. Maybe it's 5%, 7%, whatever, in this particular metric between these data sources, for example, because you have to have some level of tolerance for the variance at scale with data, because it's just going to happen. There's no real way around it. And the lesson here is that perfect attribution is, quite frankly, impossible, as I mentioned. It's really just more important that you have a consistent methodology for tracking your data as you continue to scale. Challenge number three, as I mentioned earlier, pixel pollution or pixel cleanliness, whatever you want to call it. The problem is that unqualified events did get through. They did slip through the cracks at times, and they would skew our Facebook optimization. It would throw it off for a couple days or sometimes even a week, which at scale can really damage your ROAS. And again, we're not perfect, and it did happen, but we learned from it quite quickly. And we really just made sure that we had strict hygiene protocols in place for regularly monitoring the data we were feeding back to the pixel and ensuring that we were only feeding back the cleanest, most qualified events. Challenge number four, sales team resistance to tracking. This is a big one. Sales reps don't want to be micromanaged, and that's just the reality, and it's understandable. And that was the case here. They didn't want to feel like they were being micromanaged with having to do this detailed tracking stuff. But the reality is you need your sales reps to track their shit. That's just the truth, because otherwise, if you don't have clean data from the sales team, marketing can't do its job, sales can't do its job nearly to the degree that it needs to, and everything just kind of gets thrown out of whack. So the solution was we really just positioned our tracking processes as optimizing the performance for the sales team, not, hey, we're trying to micromanage or, look over your shoulder necessarily, because that's literally the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're just trying to have the cleanest data possible. And ultimately, the lesson here is that getting buy-in from the sales team is so freaking important. You cannot just track your marketing metrics and hope to scale. You got to have the same level of attention to detail and ruthless tracking on the sales side. Challenge number five, a lot of you probably know this, but I'm just reminding you that platform reliability is only continuing to decrease. Facebook reporting for us in this particular instance just got less and less reliable as we spent more on ads. So again, the solution is we built internal tracking that did not rely on platform-specific data. So we had our own internal sources of truth that allowed us to make better decisions, server-side tracking, multiple data sources for every single key metric, and then ultimately the data QC process is really what tied it all together. Challenge number six, real-time decision-making. So There are going to be times at a higher scale level, higher spend level, where waiting for end of day reports can sometimes mean that you're just missing optimization opportunities and you could just be operating too slowly. And so you need to have the ability to make decisions in real time. And the only thing that determines your ability to do that is how clean your data is on a day in, day out basis, so that you're not relying on, weekly reports or whatever because you haven't had good data leading up to, say, that Thursday or Friday or whatever it is. Challenge number 7 was overcomplicated naming conventions. I know this might sound simple, but when you're spending multiple 6 figures a month on ads and you've got multiple offers and all this stuff going on in multiple sales teams, it's very easy to overcomplicate shit. And I will be the first to admit that even still to this day, as an operator, as a business owner, I still doesn't need to be. It's a lot less than it was back in the day, but it still happens because I'm a human being, and it happened here. So we would overcomplicate things like what we would call certain metrics, how we would name campaigns on the ad side, and it just created a lot of confusion. And the solution for us was really just simplifying everything to normal fucking names that didn't sound overcomplicated and that anyone could understand at a glance. So for example, instead of complicating the process of what we would name a marketing qualified lead versus a this qualified versus a that lead, and at this call, it was just like, we have a qualified app, we have a qualified call, and we have a qualified set call. That's it. So when we switched to these simplified naming conventions, it honestly just allowed us to take a huge out breath and made everything just so much smoother. And when things are simpler, it's just better. You just enjoy it more. And that was exactly what happened here. All right. So to wrap up here, these are the biggest lessons that we learned. Number 1, tracking systems are only as good as the people maintaining them. So you can build amazing tracking and all these fancy automations, but if you don't have the consistent oversight to ensure they work properly, and that just comes from good quality team members to do that, it doesn't matter. It's not going to work as well as you scale. Number 2, you need dedicated resources for data quality, not just data collection. So as I mentioned, it's one thing to just get the data, but if you really want accurate reporting and the ability to make high quality decisions with your marketing, you need to have clean data. And in order to get that, you need a process by which you clean that data. And in this case, for us, we had a team of VAs who did that every single morning. Lastly, attribution at scale is really more of an art than a science. It's more about your consistency and your focus on MER rather than trying to have the most perfect attribution and know exactly where someone came from. Because again, with the way customer journeys are today, it's just damn near impossible to do that due to how many touch points somebody's going to have with your business before they buy. So a few things we would do differently are we would build more automated quality control checks. So I will say in hindsight, I think we were a little over leveraged on human quality control processes. I will say there is a level of accuracy that does come from that happening that can sometimes not come from automated control checks, because sometimes shit just breaks and you might not even know it broke, and that can really cause some issues. But I do think there was some room in hindsight for us to implement more automated data quality control processes. Next up, we could have done a better job at implementing more real-time alerts for attribution discrepancies. So sometimes there was that lag that I talked about earlier between the data coming in and then the process of actually reporting it and cleaning it. So I think we could have had just a little bit of a better process of creating those real-time alerts. And then lastly, as I mentioned, I would definitely simplify the fuck out of our naming conventions sooner if I could do it over again. Again, just simplifying what we call certain metrics, simplifying campaign names, funnel names, traffic sources, all that. These are lessons that we've now been able to take into all of the clients that we help scale here at 7FM. But in hindsight, if I could do it over again in this particular business, I would simplify everything a lot sooner. So bottom line here is that when you're spending budgets like 600, 700, 800 grand a month, tracking is not just a nice thing to have. It's literally make or break. If you don't have clean quality data, honestly, you're kind of screwed. Number 2 is you need to have multiple data sources, because no single source at this scale level is going to be as reliable as you think it will be. So you need to have the ability to cross-reference multiple data sources for your key metrics so that, again, you can build more of a consistent narrative and a general picture, as opposed to hoping that one particular data source is going to give you exactly 100% accurate data. Again, goal here isn't perfect attribution. It is consistently high quality decision making, which only can come from consistently tracking and reporting your data in the same way. And lastly, your tracking systems need to scale with your spend, not just your results. So Hope you found this video helpful. Again, if you are the founder of a high ticket info coaching course consulting business, and if you're stuck at a couple $100,000 a month and you're not quite sure why, and you don't really know exactly what you need to do to break through your current scaling bottlenecks, then I would love for you to pick up the $1 Million a Month KPI Dashboard. It's in the description. It's the same tool that I use as a CMO for multiple 7 and 8 figure brands. It's also the same tool that we currently use for all of our done for you clients. And in addition to getting a crystal clear snapshot on where your marketing and sales metrics currently are, you're also going to have a growth modeling tool that's going to allow you to figure out, by plugging in your current numbers, exactly what needs to happen inside the business in order for you to hit your future revenue target. So it's going to spit out exactly the numbers you need to hit your desired revenue goal. So hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.